Good morning, everybody. I got a comment on Facebook. I didn't have time. I don't have reception over here to look at which comment the comment was commenting on. But anyway, the claim was that the ideology of the Democrat Party from 100 years ago is not the same as it is today, and it's quite the opposite. And in fact, the Republicans also have flipped. This is a lie that's been repeated time and time again. Just repeating a lie doesn't make it true. The Democrats are still the party of racism. Racism means thinking race matters. And that's the whole ideology of the critical race theory behind the so-called quote-unquote anti-racist movement, is that it mattered. These accidents of birth matter. The ideology of the Republican Party is that skin color doesn't matter any more than eye color or hair color. But the ideology of the Democrat Party is that all that matters is the color of your skin. So anybody who's trying to say, oh, the party's flipped, this and that, they are lying to themselves. Because look at the colleges where you have segregated graduation ceremonies, segregated cafes within the college, that only a person of color can spend time at this cafe and only a non-person of color can spend time at that cafe. Republicans aren't doing that. It's the same people who did segregation, and it wasn't 100 years ago, it was 50 years ago that they were still doing segregation. And it was all Democrats who fought against it. It was all Republicans who pushed the Civil Rights Act. And it just happened to be that you had a Democrat in the White House who made a very racist statement when he signed into law, saying that he believed that by signing this into law, he would get, I'm not even going to say the letter because I don't want this video to get blocked, but you know what he said, that he's going to get this group, he's a collectivist, racist Democrat, he's going to get them all to vote Democrat for 100 years. I mean, and look at the president that they have occupying the White House right now. The kind of racist rhetoric, not only that came out of his mouth 40 years ago, or 30 years ago, or whatever, the kind of laws that Mr. Biden made as senator, and he pushed the kind of racist rhetoric that he said, again, 30, 40 years ago, when he said he didn't want his kids in a racial jungle, when he pushed, all of his, he was friendly with all kinds of KKK people, and Senator Byrd was his mentor, as he was Hillary Clinton's mentor, another racist Democrat. The history of the progressive left-wing ideology that's rooted in eugenics, the ideology behind Planned Parenthood, which basically is lynching black babies in the womb, the history behind gun control, which was a tactic of the KKK, the reason why Martin Luther King couldn't get a gun as a black man, the racist history of gun control. All of these things, nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. And that's why the Democrats want to take the cops out. First of all, where are cops killing black people? In Democrat-run cities. And why do they want to get rid of the cops? So innocent black people will get killed by other black people, because that's how Democrats look at everything, through the lens of race. Whereas the Republican ideology is that we're all individuals. Yes, I am not embarrassed to say that the Republican ideology is colorblind. And the Democrats say that colorblindness is racism. That's the idea of critical race theory, is that colorblindness is racism. It's not. It's the opposite of racism. How ridiculous it is to say, meaning, I was listening to an argument a few weeks ago when the whole Dr. Seuss debacle came up, and Sean Hannity had two black men, both professionals, educated men, debating this issue. And I sometimes think, with all due respect, that a lot of these things go over Sean Hannity's head. He doesn't realize what the leftist, I'm not going to use the term liberal, because really the real liberals, the classical liberals, are the American conservatives. The so-called right in America are really the classical liberals, saying, freedom of religion, freedom of thought, freedom of speech. Civil libertarianism is something that you find only in the Republican Party. The Democrats want to take away our religious freedom, take away our freedom of speech, take away everything. They just want to put everybody, and they want to collectivize everybody, put everybody into groups, because the idea of the Democrat Party is demographics, as opposed to the names mean something. A lot of people say, oh, these names don't mean anything. If names don't mean anything, can you imagine if the Nazi Party after World War II insisted that they still keep the name Nazi, and then they started going around saying that the people who fought them are the real racists now, and they're not racist anymore, but really do the same things that they did, minus the, except instead of killing adults, they're killing babies before they're born. That's exactly what the Democrats have been doing. That's exactly what's happening. So you cannot go and tell me that the party's flipped. You cannot even show me more than 3 or 4 Dixiecrats who became Republicans. The vast majority of them remained Democrats. What happened was not that the parties flipped. What happened was the people in the South stopped being racist. I myself, as a person who is obviously Jewish, wears a distinctive garb. If I am in certain parts of New York, I am in much more danger than in the Deep South. I lived in Virginia for a while, which is not the Deep South, but it's the South, and I was just down in Arkansas a few weeks ago, which is the Deep South. I had nothing but respect. But around here, in New York City and in New York State, the type of anti-Semitism, I don't like the term anti-Semitism because it racializes Jewish identity, and I believe Judaism to be a religion and not a race. And I prefer Judeophobia or Jew hatred or some other term. And really, the truth is, I prefer Toraphobia, because I, as an Orthodox Jew, have a lot more in common with a religious Christian or religious Muslim than I do with the atheist, heretic, communists who just happen to have a quote-unquote Jewish last name. Although I don't think Sanders is really that much of a Jewish last name. I know some Jews named Sanders, or Sander. Sender is probably the original name, but whatever it is, you have a name that ends with Berg or Man or something, and all of a sudden everybody's up in arms. Oh, you mentioned the Rothschilds, you must be an anti-Semite. The Rothschilds are heretics, Sabbateans. A lot of them I don't think are even halakhically Jewish. I do have from a religious standpoint, yes, there's an idea if someone's mother is Jewish, then you're not a Gentile. That doesn't mean that there's something special about you just because you're born Jewish. What it means is you have responsibilities according to my religious views, and if you don't share those religious views, it shouldn't matter. Anybody who has a non-religious Jewish identity is a racist in my book, because they think that these accidents of birth matter. If it's based on a religious view, that's the religion, that's something else. Meaning my religion says you're born of a Jewish mother, you're what we would say halachically Jewish. But the truth is, also in halakha, in Jewish law, an atheist, an agnostic, someone who openly and wantonly violates the Sabbath, shows no respect to the Sabbath, even the slightest, is not part of the Jewish community. There's nothing wrong being a Gentile according to Judaism. There's something, but the heretic, apostate, ex-Jew is really neither Jew or Gentile, and there's something wrong with being the apostate, according to, again, within the framework and the rubric of the Jewish faith. I don't think that should have anything to do with, in general, what do they call it, public policy or anything, and that's a major reason why I oppose the racist Zionist entity, because they make it an issue of public policy. I believe in liberty. I believe in religious freedom. I believe in the First Amendment. I believe that the Constitution of the United States was inspired by Almighty God, that it's a divine document, and that there was divine providence, almost akin to prophecy. Really, the truth is, Maimonides says that a person of wisdom and logic is, in a sense, really higher than a prophet. And really, the Talmud says that Chacham Adif Minavi, and the Ariya Kodesh explains, in the Kabbalistic sense, that as well, that the sage is on a higher level than the prophet, because common sense is, in a way, superior to revealed truth. In a certain sense, again, there's a balance between them, and of course the revelation of the Torah is different than other prophetic revelations, again within the framework and rubric of Judaism. But back to my original point, it is ridiculous to say that the party's flipped. Racism is alive and well in the Democrat Party. That's their raison d'etre. That's their modus operandi. That's the whole reason that they exist, is to keep racism alive, and that's what sustains the Democrat Party. Is racism, collectivism, demographicism, putting people into groups, because then you have reliable voting blocks. And that's what it's really all about, as opposed to the Republicanist idea, both a big R Republican and little R Republicanism, is to protect the minority from the tyranny of the majority, from the tyranny of democracy, to balance, the counterbalance against the possible tyranny that democracy could bring of two wolves in a sheep voting on who's for dinner. Again, there is positive aspects of democracy, but it has to be balanced with republicanism, of protecting the minority from tyranny. And the most important minority is the minority of one. Instead of just putting everybody into groups, and which is what the Democrats like to do, collect voting blocks, what we have to do, and sometimes that's how you have to operate, because we were within the system. So I'm not criticizing the voting blocks of people who are like-minded and share common values to come together to accomplish things, because that's how you accomplish things within a democratic society. But pure democracy is dangerous. It has to be muted and balanced with republicanism. And so that's why we are in a democratic republic. We're not in a democracy. The United States is not a democracy. It is a republic that has certain democratic approaches, particularly, and it originally was only supposed to be any really direct form of democracy was on the federal level was only supposed to be in the House of Representatives. Everything else was supposed to be indirect, and I believe particularly that the 17th Amendment is one of the worst things that, probably the worst amendment that was not repealed was the 17th Amendment, making the direct election of senators. It could be modified. I could see a balance between, but I think that the state legislators are supposed to have a veto vote. They're supposed to have a voice within the federal government. That is federalism. That is one of the ideas of the United States. But the Democrats push the 17th Amendment, the progressives push the 17th Amendment because they want to undermine this country and remove it from the protection that republicanism has for the minority. And so to this day, the Republicans are still freeing the minority of all colors from the tyranny of the Democrat plantation. And it's 100% true, and that's why a lot of African Americans have woken up and supported President Trump, because he went out, he did more for the African American communities than all of the Democrats have done ever in their history. And really, President Trump did more to help the African American communities than any president since Lincoln, probably, or maybe at best since Coolidge, Coolidge was probably the best president of the 20th century, perhaps even better than Reagan. And but how did he do that? By making things better for everybody. Because what's good for everybody is good for everybody. And that's what President Trump did. But the lying communist media, the racists and the Democrats, spread lies about the least racist person. President Trump constantly said he's the least racist person, constantly disavowed all kinds of support from racists. And the media just kept lying, and they propped up this guy, Joe Biden, who is a racist. Not only he was a racist 30 years ago when he said the racial jungle and the super predators and all of these racist terms that he used, to this day, he says you ain't black, and he had to use the word ain't, because he's a racist. Joe Biden is a racist. He made comments about, oh, the Indians are taking over. He said, that it's storybook, man. Look at how articulate and clean Barack Obama is. What? How do you say that? That's racism. Nobody sees that that's racist. To say that how it's storybook, man, how articulate and clean Barack Obama is. That's what Joe Biden said about the president that he served as vice president under. That he's articulate and clean. That it's an anomaly for a black man to be articulate and clean. That is the most disgusting thing. And how is this man in the White House, this racist piece of garbage, stole the White House from America? He was placed there by these communists. He's a puppet of the Chinese Communist Party. We all know that President Trump got more votes than any president in history. It never happens that on the second your second term you get that many more votes and lose, or even get more votes at all and lose. A lot of people on their second term get less votes and still win, and yet somehow, because they were playing Calvin ball, because they changed the rules in the middle of the game, went against the Constitution. You cannot change laws referring to, that's supposed to be a check and balance that the state legislatures have, just like we talked about the folly of the 17th Amendment. The checks and balances of the state legislatures. No, you cannot by executive or judicial fiat change the laws of a federal election for president. And yet that's what they did. So these votes were illegitimate. Now I understand that the Electoral College, they convened and they did what they did, and there's really no way to fix that. But the manner by which they did it, even if I really don't believe that Joe Biden got 80 million votes, that's ridiculous. But let's say that was true. The fact of the matter that they changed the laws made this happen, and it would have been fixed, but Nancy Pelosi turned a blind eye on purpose and let what happened on January 6th happen, and sent a lot of her own people to rabble-rouse, a lot of Antifa people to rabble-rouse, push people in. There's videos of them, of the Capitol Police pushing people in who didn't even want to go inside the Capitol building. The whole idea was just to march in front of the Capitol building. No one was supposed to go inside, but the Capitol Police pushed them in, and then a few rabble-rousers, a few leftists, and they made it obvious by wearing their hats backwards. They had a few other signs, and they were taking little hammers and breaking windows. And then people said, oh, Antifa, and the Republicans were there, were trying to get them off of there, trying to prevent them from doing vandalism. And then the Capitol Police pushed them in. People had no choice but to go in there. Most of the people were just hanging around. One person got killed by the cops, but her life didn't matter. We still don't know the name of the cop who killed what's her name, Babbitt, Ashley Babbitt. This is the whole racist Democrat Party. They're still the party of the KKK, and really BLM, which is mostly run by elitist whites. It's not run by black people, and a lot of black people reject, and possibly even the majority of black people reject the BLM movement. I don't mean the idea. It's 100% true that black people and the idea of Black Lives Matter as a term, as a phrase, is an apt term, and I agree with the sentiment that say it's not enough to say all lives matter, because yes, Black lives are under assault in this country, but they're not under assault by Republicans, they're under assault by Democrats. Black babies by the millions are being lynched in the womb by the KKK party, the Democrat party, and specifically on black media. There are commercials for Planned Parenthood because there is a genocide against the black race being done by the Democrats on purpose, by design. That is their modus operandi. They are still the party of racism, segregation, slavery, and lynching. And now they're lynching from the womb. And they have been lynching from the womb for 50 years. And people say, well, white people get abortions too. The truth is, in the eyes of the Democrats, elitists, and that includes people who happen to have black skin like Barack Obama. A poor white person has the same contempt in their eyes, and the eyes of the Democrat leftist elitists, as a black person from the inner city. It's really that same type of collectivism, and so yes, they are pushing, but in a certain sense it's still kind of collateral damage. But yes, if you study the history of Planned Parenthood, and it's to this day, meaning if you call Planned Parenthood and say, can I specifically earmark a donation to support black abortions, they will be thrilled to be making more black abortions, because that's their main point, is to wipe out these minority groups. That's been from their beginning. But also, yes, they want to wipe out the poor whites. They want to make an elitist society. They are literally Nazis, except that the Nazi Party, when they studied the laws, the Jim Crow laws that the Democrat Party made, they found out, oh, wait a second, this is a little too racist for us. Meaning when the Nazis were making the Nuremberg laws, and everybody knows this is a historical fact, they studied the Jim Crow laws, which is a historical fact, were 100% Democrat. There was never a Republican involved in Jim Crow laws. All of the first black senators and congresspeople were Republicans. And when the Nazis saw that it was a one-drop rule, which is still to this day, because somehow the vice president, who was half Indian and a quarter Irish, and I think 1/8, Jamaican or Haitian or something, one of those islands, she's black, because the Democrats still follow the Jim Crow one-drop law, and so she's black, right? Like that matters. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. What matters is not the color of her skin, but the content of her character, of which we know she has none. We know she is an utterly corrupt person and has been her whole life, and nothing has changed. And she has that stupid laugh whenever, she gets caught in a lie. And she's going to be the president, because we know Biden's not going to last that long. Even if he is alive, he's probably going to step down in a year and a half or so, and give her the opportunity to be president for 10 years. We know that that's been the plan all along. Even though she was totally unpopular by a Democratic stance in her own state, she couldn't get more than, 2% of the vote in the primary. This is what's going on in this world. And the Democrats are still the racists, and nothing has changed, because all they care about is race, so they're racist. Racism doesn't necessarily mean bigotry, but because they're making it like their segregationism and their racism is to help these races. But that's not what America is supposed to be about. America is supposed to be a colorblind society. We are supposed to be inclusive. That doesn't mean you abandon your culture That doesn't mean you abandon but I'm talking about on the federal level. Yes, you can be proud to be, black and proud of your culture and all that. That's fine. That's beautiful. I support that. But I'm talking about on the federal level, everybody's supposed to be the same. It's unconstitutional to treat one race better than other. But we see what, I've talked enough. I got to learn. I got things to do. Thank you for watching. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe. Comment. We'll see you all later. All right. But the Democrats are the racists, and the Republicans are still the real anti-racists. They're still the party of Lincoln. They're still the party of colorblindness. That is, and I'm not ashamed. I know that the CRT people say that colorblindness is wrong and it's racist. I'm insisting that it's not, because it's ridiculous to say that, and I recognize the core of that critical race theory idea that no, race does matter, but not on the federal level. That's what I'm saying. If you want in your own community, in your own cultural expressions and all that thing, we do that too. I don't have a problem with that. But I don't think it matters on the federal level. And I'm opposed to the IRC definition of anti-Semitism and all these things too. I'm trying my best to be consistent across the board. Not trying, this is what I really believe, and I'm passionate about this. But this is the world that we're living in, where the Democrats are pushing race down our throats because they are racist. Thank you for watching. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe. Comment. We'll see you later.